Good day, scholars. We are continuing with the one and only Ivan. We are today reading pages 138 to 160. It's chapters 64 to 72. I am starting on 138. Punishment. I soon learned that humans can screech even louder than monkeys. After that, I was never allowed in the kitchen. So, scholars, you have to think back to our last reading, right? What was happening that there was a screech going on? Do you remember? So, if you back up and look, 139. Babies. Back in those days, the Big Top Mall was smaller. It had a pony ride, a wooden train that bustled around the parking lot, a few bedraggled parrots, and a surly spider monkey. But when Mac brought me, a baby gorilla, dressed in a crisp tuxedo, to the mall, everything changed. People came from far and wide to have their pictures taken with me. They brought me blocks and a toy guitar. They held me in their laps. Once, I even held a baby in mine. She was small and slippery. Bubbles flowed from her lips. She squeezed my fingers. Her rear was puffy with padding. So think about that in a minute. A baby, her bottom was puffy. All right, some kind of padding. What would that be? Did you think diaper? Her legs bowed like bent twigs. I made a face. She made a face. I grunted. She grunted. I was so afraid she would fall that I squeezed her tightly, and her mother yanked her away. I wonder if my mother ever worried about dropping us. We always held on, but that's easier to do when your mother is furry. Human babies are an ugly lot, but their eyes are like our babies' eyes. Too big for their faces and for the world. Beds. One day, after many weeks of loud talking, Helen packed a bag and slammed the front door and never came back. I don't know why. I never know the why of humans. That night, I slept with Mac in his bed. My old nests were woven of leaves and sticks and shaped like his bathtub, cool green cocoons. Mac's bed, like mine, was flat, hot, without sticks and stars. Still, he made a sleeping sound like the rumble my father used to make when all was well, a sound from deep inside his belly. So what's Mac doing, everyone? Right, he's snoring. Page 142. My place. Mac grew sullen. So when you're sullen, you're kind of sulky and glum. You're down in the dumps. Right? I grew bigger. I became what I was meant to be. Too large for chairs. Too strong for hugs. Too big for human life. I tried to stay calm, to move with dignity. I did my best to eat daintily. But human ways are hard to learn, especially when you're not human. When I saw my new domain, I was thrilled. What does it mean if you're thrilled, scholars? Right? You're excited, you're happy, right? You're excited about it, right? You're thrilled for something. And who wouldn't have been? It had no furniture to break, no glasses to smash, no toilets to drop Mac's keys into. It even had a tire swing. I was relieved to have my own place. Somehow, I didn't realize I'd be here quite so long. Now I drink Pepsi, eat old apples, watch reruns on TV. but many days I forget what I am supposed to be. Am I a human? Am I a gorilla? So, scholars, let's think about that for a moment because that comes up in your assignment, right? So, can you see how sometimes he forgets what he is, right? Because much of what they're doing with him are things that you would do with a human, but he's also still a gorilla. So he's really stuck on, am I a gorilla? Am I a human? I'm starting to act and do things that are much more being like a human. So he sometimes gets caught up in that and kind of forgets and thinks, what am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? Back to the story. Humans have so many words, more than they truly need. Still, they have no name for what I am. Right? He doesn't truly get to be a gorilla in there, does he? Not a true gorilla. Page 144. 9,876 days. Ruby is finally asleep. I watch her chest rise and fall. Bob, too, is snoring. But my mind is still racing. For perhaps the first time ever, I've been remembering. It's an odd story to remember, I have to admit. My story has a strange shape. A stunted beginning, an endless middle. Right? So he doesn't really remember the beginning of his life very well, right? And then there's this whole bunch in the middle that he's really thinking about. I count all the days I've lived with humans. Gorillas count as well as anyone, although it's not a particularly useful skill to have in the wild. I've forgotten so many things, and yet I always know precisely how many days I've been in my domain. I take one of the magic markers Julia gave me. I make an X, a small one, on my painted jungle wall. I make more X's and more. I make an X for every day of my life with humans. My marks look like this. Everyone looking in their book? The rest of the night, I mark the days, and when I am done, my wall looks like this. And so on, until there are 9,826 X's marching across my wall like a parade of ugly insects. So, scholars, we have two figurative languages there, right? All those X's marching across my wall, right? Can X's actually march? No, right? But it's meaning, right? They're all lined up, so they look like they're marching, right? Walking, boom, 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 boom. And there's this like a parade of ugly insects because the X's aren't actually ugly insects. Right? So marching across my wall is personification because they're not really marching. X's can't really do that. That's a human quality. And like a parade of ugly insects, they're comparing the X's all lined up to insects marching in a line. So that like tells us it's a simile comparing the X's and the insects. A visit, page 147. It's almost morning when I hear steps. It's Mac. He has a sharp smell. He weaves as he walks. He stands next to my domain. His eyes are red. He is staring out the window at the empty parking lot. Ivan, my man, he mumbles. Ivan. He presses his forehead against the glass. Can you picture him doing that, right? We've been through a lot, you and me. A new beginning. We don't see Mac for 2 days. When he returns, he doesn't talk about Stella. Mac says he is anxious to teach Ruby some tricks. He says the billboard is bringing in more visitors. He says it's time for a new beginning. All afternoon and into the evening, Mac works with Ruby. Ruby's feet are looped with rope so that she cannot run. A heavy chain hangs off her neck. Mac shows her Stella's ball, her pedestal, her stool. He introduces her to Snickers. When Ruby obeys Mac, he gives her a cube of sugar or a bit of dried apple. When she doesn't, he yells and kicks at the sawdust. When George and Julia arrive, Mac is still training Ruby. Julia sits on a bench and watches them. She draws a little, but mostly she just keeps her eyes on Ruby. Sorry. Bob watches too. He's hiding in the corner of my domain under not tag. It's raining outside, and Bob does not like damp feet. Ruby trudges behind Mac, her head drooping. Endlessly they circle the ring. So they just keep going around and around. Sometimes Mac slaps her flank with his hand. So kind of her back end, right, where her hips and tail kind of meet, right? That back end is the flank of an animal. Suddenly, Ruby jerks to a stop. Mac pulls the chain hard, but Ruby refuses to move. Come on, Ruby. Mac is almost pleading. What is your problem? She's exhausted, I say to myself. That's the problem. Mac groans. Idiot elephant. Idiot human, Bob mutters. Walk, Ruby, I say, although I know she's too far away to hear me. Do what he says. Walk, Mac commands. Now. Ruby doesn't walk. She plops her rump on the sawdust floor. I think maybe she's tired, Julia says. Mac wipes his forehead with the back of his arm. Yeah, I know. We're all tired. He pushes Ruby with the heel of his boot. She ignores him. George looks over from the food court, where he's wiping off tables. Mac, he yells, maybe you should call it a day. I'll close up. Mac yanks on Ruby's chain. She's as anchored as a tree trunk. Ooh, another simile, right? Because Ruby's not a tree trunk, and it uses the word as. Right? So it's letting us know she's like, she's solid sitting, right? She's not going to budge any more than you could budge a big tree stump, a tree trunk. He pulls harder and falls to his knees. That does it, Mac says. He brushes sawdust off his jeans. I'm through playing around. Mac stomps off to his office. When he returns, he is carrying a long stick. The gleaming hook on its end is almost beautiful, like a sliver of moon. Did you hear another simile? It's a claw stick. Mac pokes Ruby with the sharp point. Not hard, just a touch. I can tell he wants her to see how much it can hurt. I growl low in my throat. Ruby doesn't budge. She is a gray, unmoving boulder. Ooh, scholars, that one's a metaphor, right? Because she's not actually a boulder. It doesn't use like or as. They're saying she is a boulder, right? So again, she's sitting there. She's all big and solid, right? Like trying to imagine pushing or moving a big boulder. She closes her eyes and for a moment I wonder if she might have fallen asleep. I'm warning you, Max says. He breathes out. He stares at the ceiling. Ruby makes a huffing sound. Fine, Max says. You want to play it that way? I'm on 152. He draws back the claw stick. No! Julia cries. I'm not gonna hurt her, Max says. I just want to get her attention. Bob snarls. Max swings. The hook slices the air just a few inches above Ruby's head. See why you don't want to mess with me? Max says. He draws back the claw stick again. Now move! Ruby jerks her head, flinging her trunk toward Mac. She makes a noise that sends the sawdust scattering. It makes my glass shiver. It is the most beautiful mad I have ever heard. Ruby's trunk slaps into Mac. I don't see exactly where she strikes him. Somewhere below his stomach, I think. And I know he must be uncomfortable because Mac drops the claw stick and falls down on the ground and curls into a ball and howls like a baby. Ooh. Another simile. Right? Because he howls like a baby, right? Mac's not a baby, but it's letting you know he's howling. Right? Think of a baby when a baby howls, right? Is hungry or tired, scared. That's Mac now, curled up in a ball. Direct hit, Bob says. And scholars, that's where I'm going to stop. That leaves you a few pages on your own to read today. So 154 to 160. Make sure you read that part. You can't just listen to what I've read and then not read the rest of the section. So be sure to do that. And then I'll see you in a couple moments for our work in our packet.